welcome everyone to a special episode of the Illusion of Consensus podcast with myself, Rav Arora, independent journalist based in Vancouver, BC. Today I'm here with Joe Lonsdale, who is a very prominent, renowned investor and entrepreneur known for founding Palantir Technologies in 2004. A company whose software has been used in a number of intelligence and counterterrorism operations. He's also the founder of 8VC, which is a venture capital firm. He's involved in a number of different projects. I got to know him a little bit earlier this year when I went to this UATX event, this new University of Austin, which Joe helped found and build. They just welcomed their first freshman class just in the last few days. But I've been following Joe's work for a while. And as someone who is quite ambitious and forward thinking and wanting to create new things, wanting to build a better future, Joe's work has been very inspirational. And I've been following it for a long time, quite voraciously. So it's an honor to talk to you here. Thanks for coming on, Joe.
Thanks, Rob, for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, Palantir just joined the S&P 500 last week, and university that I chair just launched, and there's all sorts of things going on in the world. So I'm excited to catch up.
Yeah. It was a great meeting earlier this year. It was great to chat with you and just take a look at what UATX is about. I mean, it's such a powerful testament to how people can come together and create something new, not just focus on the problem. I mean, even in my own podcast here, Jay and I are doing a lot of podcasts on the Illusion of Consensus, focused on the problem in part, and Jay's still focusing a lot on the legacy of COVID, lessons learned on the pandemic, management of the pandemic, problems with FDA, CDC, etc. But we're also doing a lot of podcasts on how people can improve their health using different holistic health modalities, new treatments for mental health, things like psychedelic therapies, etc., creating new healthcare systems and ways for people to take ownership of their life in a number of different ways. You're doing that in your own ways that are very powerful. I have a lot of questions for you. We'll have to focus in on a few handful of topics here. Let's talk for a couple minutes about your endorsement of Trump. And there's so much to talk about there, but
just lost half listeners right away. No, that's great. I'm excited to chat about it. It's funny because you don't really want to be known by these very polarizing political things, but at the same time, it's important to have the courage when you believe something matters to speak out on it. So that's a fun one.
Yeah. So let's focus in a little bit with kind of this very interesting coalition that Trump has with a diverse range of thinkers. You have RFK Jr. endorsing him. You have various people formerly associated with the Democratic Party and the left, people like Elon Musk, who potentially will be involved in his administration. What do you make of people like RFK and Elon Musk kind of joining forces? And I'm sure they don't agree on everything. There's areas of disagreement, but they're coming together in this very powerful, multifaceted coalition. I'm curious your thoughts on kind of building bridges across the aisle.
Yeah, in politics today, probably most of the energy, as you hinted at, is talking about what's wrong and what's broken. And I think both sides are like, well, this is really scary and broken about Trump, and here's why I don't think he stands for principles that I appreciate. And they, well, here's what's really scary about Kamala. And so I think we can talk about some of that. And given that I am on the side I am on, I am more afraid of the far left things Kamala would do. I also respect their smart people who are more afraid and more focused on things they don't like about Trump. I do think what you just highlighted is really inspiring, is that we have people as diverse as the greatest entrepreneur alive in the world, Elon Musk. I say that with a tinge of jealousy because I've started multiple unicorn companies. He has outperformed me so far. He's 12 years older though, so give me some time. Yeah. But I know just Elon's a friend, and obviously it'd just be amazing to have someone with those talents involved in making our government more efficient, making our government smarter, making it when we spend money, we don't just light it on fire like we have been for so many things, making our civilizational functional again, and someone like RFK Jr. who thinks for himself. Do I agree with him fully on all of his thoughts on vaccines? No. But do I admire that he thinks for himself? Listen, this guy came from a background where he's known from a young age that there was something very sketchy about how his uncle was killed. His family understood that. So he knows some of these conspiracies are somewhat real. And so he thinks for himself, and he's not afraid to pursue things, to pursue what's truth about health, about food, I think there's a lot of positives there. So I think the positives all around Trump with those guys, with a lot of positive policies they're going to do, a lot of the stuff they're going to continue on from last time, like Abraham Accords, like better health innovation. There's just so many good things on that side that yeah, I am optimistic if he wins, we can get a lot of really great things done. And frankly, I am terrified about some of the worst policies we're seeing that are consistently things Kamala supported in the past. So for me, it's a very easy choice.
Yeah. I mean, I think free speech is such a big issue, especially throughout COVID. We saw how
the free speech thing it's another example of how we call it the Borg. I don't know what you guys call it in your podcast, but the Borg of the media and the government and the universities and the nonprofits and all these groups that all think the same, that all kind of enforce everyone to go along. Like they're sponsoring censorship and they're using it against their enemies, and they're doing it in Europe, they're doing it in Brazil, and we caught them doing it. I'm sure you guys talk about in your podcast with Dr. Bhattacharya as well here in the U.S. This is a terrifying way to wield power. We have to stop it.
Yeah, and then they use these false, seemingly noble guises of safety, protecting people. We need to protect people from misinformation and disinformation. And we saw during the COVID pandemic, what ended up happening was information, as Mark Zuckerberg admitted on the Lex Fridman podcast, how not only information that was debatable, but some information that turned out to be true. And we had the recent letter that Zuckerberg penned on how he regrets complying with the censorship orders going along with the federal government. That was really a remarkable statement that he made.
I really appreciate Zuckerberg apologizing, frankly, for going along with some of that nonsense. And it was obviously a scandal what they did, and he realizes he was used in that. But you said it's for safety, and I think it's a great quote by an early American founder that anyone who would give up a liberty for safety deserves neither liberty nor safety. And this is absolutely critical that we maintain our liberties in this country. And the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason. And these people definitely violated it. If this was the right violating it, Rob, you would hear about it everywhere. The way they violated it, they did tons of things that if they're not illegal should be illegal. And I hope will be ruled illegal later, because using NGOs to censor for them just because they couldn't do it themselves, it's unacceptable. And we have to oppose that with every fiber of our being to keep this a free country. So yes, you're right. This is a critical issue for the country.
Yeah. Yeah, and so many of those perspectives that were censored, people like Jay Bhattacharya, ended up being true on many different things when it came to lockdowns and various pandemic policies. I mean, that for people, I mean, that was the biggest fuel for conspiracy theory over the past few years. And yes, some people have gone way too far in the deep end with every conspiracy theory, and some people are just not willing to believe anything that the government says or anything that the medical establishment says on everything. And all pharmaceutical companies are gigantic, psychopathic, evil corporation. But that was fueled so much from the pandemic, and how you saw people in the federal government openly lying, twisting the truth to fit their narrative, playing these games, treating the public as little children who need to be lied to or given.
I hate that kindergarten. I hate that kindergarten accent they use, like their kindergarten teacher talking down to us. These especially women in the Kamala Harris side are using, like, we're going to tell you, and this is what we're all going to do. And it's just like, and you made a really good point, Rob, where there have been some really, really bad things they've censored that were true. And that's so unhealthy for our country, because you do get people now who say, wait a second, that was untrue. What else is untrue that you're telling me? What else can't I trust? And they start not trusting some more basic things. For example, recently we had a podcast around World War II that I think was completely ahistoric nonsense. It was a very mediocre historian had written a book. This guy who's never written any book was talking about with Tucker, and tried to make Churchill the enemy and Hitler the better guy. And like, what the problem is in our society is once you start having our institutions we're supposed to respect censor things and lie to us, and we can't trust them anymore. Certain people want to not trust anything at all. And you know what? It is good to question everything, but if you don't have any sense of smart, respected institutions, you start questioning things in silly ways, and you start going off down nonsense. And it is very dangerous on both sides. And the mistake on the left that tries to censor for some things causes this reaction mistake, which on the far right, and they're both bad.
Yeah, and so much of the criticism and skepticism is warranted. In my own life, when it comes to even just my health, physical and mental health, so many issues that I've gone through psychologically. The answers I found not in kind of mainstream medical advice, but kind of outside of that, exploring a number of different areas, which I've talked about on the podcast. But we need new institutions. We need, because people are working 9-to-5 jobs. They don't have time to fact check every supplement, everything that they consume in the news or in terms of their health.
100%. We need trustworthy institutions. And right now, a lot of our institutions have lost that trust, and that's a very dangerous place for our society.
So talk to me about ways that you're envisioning the future. I mean, we can talk about UATX, anything else for you, things that you're building in order to create a better future. I mean, just UATX obviously being such an inspirational one with Fred, the new incoming freshman class. Many of the people I'd met at the February event that I was at in Austin, such a bright, interesting cohort of young people. I mean, that to me was just so inspiring to see that, yes, we can be on Twitter all day and complain about what the left is doing, but here's actually steps that you're taking to actually improve the future and foster young talent who are going to be in positions of power or influence, and therefore influence economics, politics, culture, etc.
No, it's extremely important. Now, we need new institutions in every area of our society. We'll talk about the university, but we need new institutions in media, and what you're doing is very important. We're working on things in some of those areas. We need new institutions in healthcare. We need new defense companies, because the old defense primes that dominate everything are no longer very good. They were 30 years ago. They're not now, which means we could be open to our enemies and we could waste lots of money. We need new institutions in healthcare. There's just all these areas that are very broken. So the university, to me, is very core to a lot of it, because basically our culture is really shaped in a lot of ways by our best and brightest. And so what happens at Stanford, what happens at Harvard, what happens at Yale, Princeton, et cetera, as much as we wouldn't like it to, a lot of our brightest go into these places. They end up building and running a lot of our companies, a lot of our governments. And so how they think, what they've learned to do, that permeates the rest of our society, our media, our healthcare as well. And unfortunately, especially the last 10 years, these schools have just gone extremely woke and extremely illiberal. And they're really teaching kids, like, shut up unless you're virtue signaling. Don't speak out. Don't get yourself in trouble. You can lose everything if you speak out against something that a lot of other people think. It basically is treating them the opposite of courage, the opposite of intellectual freedom, the opposite of pursuit of truth. So all the Enlightenment values that make our civilization function, make our civilization work, you're learning the opposite of that at all of our top universities. They've universally been conquered in all these departments. And there's a few places left where there's like a few open things and where the few presidents say the right things. But even University of Chicago, which was saying a lot of the right things, they have multiple departments where you can't get a job as a professor unless you're effectively a Marxist, unless you hate America, unless you hate markets. That's the only way to get into several of their departments there. It's true for a lot of other schools in a lot of places. So what do we do? And a lot of people say, well, we need to recapture and rebuild these things. But you look into it, and those boards are locked down. Like, they completely block people that might be even a moderate, let alone, God forbid, a Republican or someone who's pro-free market. Like, keep those people away from our boards, keep them away from our control, so that they're locked down in a very aggressive way. I don't think we're getting those back for at least a generation. So what else can we do other than build a new competitor? And guess what? It's America. So you can build new competition. And, Rob, they actually set a lot of really dumb laws to make it really hard to start new universities. There's thousands of pages of regulation. There's accreditors. There's all sorts of nonsense. But my co-founders and I are pretty stubborn. Barry Weiss is building a lot of new things in media. Neil Ferguson, one of the great minds, great living historians of the world today. It's actually Sir Neil these days, he was knighted. And, having allies like that and many others from both political sides helping us, we've been able to push it across the line. And, hopefully we can set an example of what a top university can look like, where you actually can pursue truth and you can train, young people to be courageous.
Absolutely. Yeah. The woke degeneration of our institutions, particularly universities, is really hard to exaggerate. I mean, it's really hard to do that. Just so much over the past few years has gone wrong. I live here in a small town called Chilliwack, a couple hours away from Vancouver. Very conservative town. A lot of immigrants from Holland, the Netherlands, a lot of evangelical Christians. And even here, there's the University of Fraser Valley, which I'd been studying religious philosophy, Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu over the past few years, something most people don't know about. I've just been doing courses, independent studies on the side, looking at religion. But in the wake of 2020, during the right in the aftermath of the George Floyd riots, I'd penned this one essay, which kind of sprungboard my career in journalism. It was about the fallacies and forget the title, but toxicity of identity politics and the fallacies of white privilege. And that essay just immediately went viral. And I just wrote this like one-time thing kind of speaking out on what I felt like was a regression in terms of race relations in our society, putting people in these boxes of brown, white, this person's inherently privileged, this person is disadvantaged, this person's a victim of this and this and this. And I felt that was just way too simplistic of a way of examining hardship and true victimhood. And that essay in the New York Post immediately went viral. And I remember in the wake of that, at my local college, as with many, many places, there were all these efforts to talk about race, have a productive or seemingly productive discussion. And this one sociology professor, she also of South Asian background like myself, was holding this think tank or this group for young individuals to talk about race relations. And then on Twitter publicly, I was like, "Oh, I'd love to take part in this. I'd love to join." And obviously, people had known about my work, and it blew up across both Canada and the U.S. And then she said, "No, we're not here to debate. Like, your perspective is not. That's not what we're here for. We're only here for talking about the impact of systemic racism, which is much more complicated even here in Canada. The situation's it's very different compared to
they don't want debate. They want to they're the priests of the religion, and it's a form of priesthood that does not brook argument. So they're not interested in any kind of conversation or discussion where they're not just being listened to and followed. It's a very intolerant religion, and it's disgusting how it's conquered so much of our society. And I just don't understand, Rob, why do so many smart people want to be on the side of the intolerant priests? I mean, I guess this is always how it's been historically when you've had very intolerant forms of other religions that have taken over, especially you read about things like in 15th century Spain, for example, and it just got really, really aggressive, almost like it was a reaction to the Muslims they just defeated and kicked out. And they themselves became really radicalized and started kicking everyone else out. And it was just this nasty sort of energy that it's just really unnecessarily aggressive against anyone who disagrees with them. And I look back on that as a kid reading about those times, when all the Jews were banished in 1492. And you say, wow, these people are just insane. And then lo and behold, 20 years later, I'm living in a society surrounded by these same insane people. I was like, what is going on? And it's obviously human nature, but wow, our smart friends push back more. It really bothers me.
Yeah. And I was just giving my personal example just to show how far reaching this problem is, and just
we
how
see it. We see it everywhere.
It's so everywhere. It's not even isolated in like this part and the other. It's like it's so everywhere. Even in like my former high school, now there are no more male and female bathrooms. There's just bathrooms for everyone that everyone can go to, because there were all these conflicts of people who were transitioning or gender nonconforming, gender fluid, etc. You have my former French teacher, who's a very hardcore anti-Trump, very left-leaning woman, who now I just visited her recently and was talking about how so many kids in her French class, they're identifying with the other gender, and it's just causing all this chaos for gender pronouns in her French class.
That's different.
She was railing against Trump, and she was railing against Trump in her class, several years ago, talking about the right wing, and now she's just seeing the impact of what is seemingly this very loving, compassionate. Because if you score liberals psychologically, they're very high on helping people, love, compassion. We want to help the people that are marginalized, but baked within that ideology is just just neglecting reality. And you can't have infinite of anything. If you have infinite love and compassion, you're going to end up hurting people, right? You need a balance, order, and you need structure.
Balance. You need a balance, right? You study the religions, like we need a balance of the masculine and the feminine, and we talk a lot about toxic masculinity in our society, a lot about it, and it can be a problem. But it should be telling that the thing we don't talk about, the toxic other side, we're not allowed to say that. but that actually might be what's actually more of a problem, is the thing you can't talk about, right? That's always a good lesson in society, is what can't you say? And my daughters, and I have 4 daughters, and we talk a lot about careless compassion. My 7-year-old was giving a lecture to my aunt the other day, which I really appreciated, about the dangers of careless compassion when she heard about something someone was doing, which is, obviously my kids will learn that. I'm not sure other kids are learning about that, unfortunately.
Now, there's a similar concept in Buddhism known as idiot compassion. It's when you overextend compassion in areas where other tools are necessary, right? Where you need discipline and structure, and you need to actually have hard conversations. It's that you can't just have infinite compassion. But unfortunately, we've seen the perversion of compassion, and people on the far left implementing policies that are actually doing more harm than good.
Well, I think it really is an imbalance of these energies in our society. Like when you go back, I wrote a piece about being bold and courage, and there's the Macaulay essays that Churchill memorized that were very famous mid-19th century essays, where he talks about standing up when no one else will stand up against the bad guy, and says, "How can one die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers, the temple of his gods?" And these are things that every little boy would memorize, and it's a masculine value to have this kind of boldness and courage to stand up and stand out against what's wrong and speak against it. And we're really kind of trying to beat that out of everyone in our society right now, which is horrible, because we do need more of that courage to say, no, this is nonsense. You can't be a kiddie. You can't have a litter box at school. And if you scratch that kid, you're suspended. It's just like, I'm referring to a story that happened here. It's on my mind, but it's just crazy right now.
Yeah. Let's talk about DEI. I talked a lot about race. I brought that up. That was obviously one of the core issues that I was writing about a couple years ago. Now I've transitioned more towards big pharma and regulation of drugs and medicines and healthcare policies, et cetera, and censorship. But that is a topic that I wrote a lot about in 2020 and 2021, just seeing so many institutions just cave to this DEI ideology, institutions that were or still are in many ways still quite respectable. But when it comes to this, there's just like an utter blind spot. And there's this idea of we need to preferentially hire based on race or allocate certain resources or certain amount of hiring towards specific groups. I mean, there's just so many problems with that. One being the fact that you never get equal outcomes, and in areas where you have other groups doing well, like I once wrote about this. If you look at Grammy award-winning music artists, or if you just look at like Spotify stats, popular music artists, you see an overrepresentation of Black Americans. You see an underrepresentation of Asian Americans. Now, personally, the music I listen to, there's more Black artists than Asian artists or Jewish artists, etc. And if you watch the NBA, there's an overrepresentation of Black individuals. You look at the overrepresentation of men in engineering and various scientific fields, but that's a problem in certain areas when it's the quote unquote powerful groups that are overrepresented, or other groups are that are deemed marginalized or underrepresented. And there's this idea that we got to correct that, not knowing that there are plenty of other areas where the quote unquote marginalized groups are doing better, but those areas are never talked about because it's not convenient to this equal outcomes narrative.
Yeah, I think this whole idea that everything, when I talk about this, Rob, I think first of all, I think our goal should be, obviously, and I think yours is as well, how do we pull over the moderates? How do we pull over thoughtful people? And I think a lot of people say, oh, those guys are talking about DEI, and they don't know any better. They assume if you're against it, that you're racist in some form. I think a lot of people really truly do believe that. They assume you just must be racist or must be bitter about something negative. And it's really unfortunate, because I think people are just misunderstanding reality, and they're making things dysfunctional unnecessarily. And I think they're creating more racism, right? So, for me, where I would go with it is, first of all, you want people to be able to do what they're passionate about, and want them to be able to have a fair chance and fair opportunity to do it. And so I think there are still some structural barriers in our society, and we shouldn't just pretend there's none at all. But on the other hand,
right. If you grew up in Southside Chicago versus some nice area in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, etc., there's going to be differences of opportunity.
Yeah. What can we do to help people who come from tougher backgrounds, who don't have two parents in the household, who didn't have a culture around them where, even though they might be really bright, they didn't have a culture that kind of gave them a pathway to learn things? Like, I think first of all, that's where this energy on the left is reflecting something very positive that all of us should want. And so, and I think it's important we always kind of meet people where they are, where it's like, here's where our values align, because that is a great thing. And I've personally been very involved in a lot of philanthropies that go into these communities in different ways. And I have mentors who are multi-billionaires who've, Harlem Children's Zone, they've really fixed that part of Harlem, brought the math scores above state average through a lot of effort and a lot of money. And so I'm not against any of that. I think it's important we're on their team on that. The thing that really gets me, I'll tell you, and it's a bigger societal issue. It used to be in the American, bear with me here, it used to be that we just gave jobs to anyone in government in the 19th century who was friends with the people who won. And after Civil War, the middle of the 19th century, American government grew dramatically. There's always new departments created. And they realized, wait a second, we're just like giving jobs to cronies, tens of thousands of them. It's super broken. There's actually a lot of money now. Let's make sure they're competent. So in 1883 in America, the Pendleton Act actually required merit-based tests. And so suddenly, in order to run different things in different departments, you had to pass a pretty hard test. These tests were hard. By 1970s, we still had these tests. Like, we went to the moon, by the way, in the meantime. We won all these world wars. The government was generally pretty competent for 100 years. And in the 1970s, the tests were still around. They're called the PACE exams around then. And it was about I think 6, 7, 8% of people could pass them who actually took the test for the hard, high level things. But unfortunately, it was less than 1% of African Americans, got that score at the time, and a lower percent too for other minorities. Sure, it was higher for Jews. I probably shouldn't say that, but it's just the way these things go in tests, right? Again, the Jews obviously would be worse than other things, as you pointed out. So basically, the courts had gone very left by then, and they said, you know what, this is disparate impact. We can't have these tests. And then people said, wait a second, these tests measure likely performance. We've proven it. They work. And they say, too bad, whites are scoring higher. Get rid of the test. So we got rid of the tests, and we got rid of the ability to fire people as well. It made it lots and lots of protections so you couldn't fire people. So suddenly we're not hiring competent people. We're not able to fire people when they underperform, and we've hired millions more of these employees. And so you have this government in the U.S. with millions of employees, and it keeps spending tens of billions of dollars on stuff that gets nothing done, right? We're making fun of it, but it's sad. Our civilization has trains to nowhere where we threw tens of billions of dollars into it. We have programs for chargers or for buses or for all sorts of things in defense where we spend all this money, and it's a huge failure. And you say, guys, this is pretty simple. We thanks to this proto DEI, right? Thanks to disparate impact, we got rid of all of the merit in hiring. We got rid of the accountability. Of course it's broken. And it's just frustrating to me. We don't talk about it more. I guess on the left, they're kind of captured by the government unions and they're for all this stuff, sort of. But even the moderate left agrees with me, but can't say it. Then on the right, I guess people aren't necessarily always smart enough to care about the system level impacts of government being completely broken. But it's like, come on, guys, we have to fix this. Our civilization is going to die. It's going to be broken if we don't fix this. So yeah, it's a huge issue. And it's again, it's careless compassion. They were trying to help the minorities, but they just broke. I mean, you have lots of stupid white people in government now who wouldn't have passed the test either, right? You just broke government. And you gave it tons of money. It's spending trillions of dollars in stupid ways. So it's very frustrating to me what's happened here. And it's pretty obvious how to fix it. We just need competent people in charge that can go in and do that and fight for it, right? And thank goodness we have a Supreme Court that would probably let us get rid of disparate impact rules and just put back in tests, put back in competence. If we had a great leader, we could fix these things.
Yeah, and it occurs to me that it's kind of a cop-out, kind of a cheap sort of Band-Aid solution to implement DEI, kind of top-down level, rather than looking at, okay, at the ground level, why don't we have more talent in these particular communities?
100%. Roland Fryer, who's a African-American Harvard professor who I chatted with recently, he's very involved in university and other things. He's done a lot of great work on this and on what actually works for education. You're basically just cheating yourself with DEI. You actually have to go fix a societal problem and why these people are not able to get the opportunities and succeed. And there's so much we can actually fix versus hiring people who are not competent for the job. 100%.
Right. And you just end up kind of benefiting in many cases, sort of more affluent or more well-doing individuals who come from minority backgrounds. Like you're not actually helping the kids in Southside Chicago.
You know what the stat is on this, which I thought was fascinating, is that at the 90th percentile, so people who are already doing really, really well in our society, the successful Black people get promoted much faster. They do much better than people of the same skill set, which is great. They're outperforming now. At the 50th percentile, for people of the same skill set, the white people are still getting promoted faster. So it's actually really interesting where it's like on the high end, which is more obviously my experience and my friend's experience, given all the things we're doing, we see everyone just really eager to help Black people, which is great. And they're getting way ahead. But on the low end, we're still not. And so there's something very broken still in our culture and with how these policies are actually playing out. And I totally agree with you. We should focus on the actual talents and skills and actually building those skills for real versus doing a cop-out with these kind of Band-Aid solutions.
Hi, everyone. A quick recommendation. I just saw a great film on YouTube called Medicating Normal. It's about the growing trend to medicate mental distress with powerful psychiatric drugs like Prozac, Xanax, Seroquel, and Adderall. For some people, once on these drugs, they're almost impossible to get off, and they have devastating side effects. The film tells the story of people whose lives were ruined by taking these common prescriptions. Watch a trailer and the award-winning film on medicatingnormal.com. That's Medicating Normal, medicating with an ing at the end, normal.com. Our show notes and newsletter will have information on how to find the film. There's also a YouTube channel. Don't miss it. Check out the link in the description below. Thanks. Yeah, I think generally people in the political or kind of popular cultural arena are just stuck in these slogans and these online Twitter debates and podcast discussions. It kind of misses the complexity of the situation. It's like
100%.
So one group's going to yell racist, slavery, Jim Crow. It's like, okay, other group's going to say, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just get married. And, yes, you should do that. That's a good message. But when it comes to actually implementing better policies and programs to mentor and guide young people who come from these deeply broken backgrounds filled with trauma and social issues, family issues, lacking meaning and structure, that's a very difficult problem to solve. And that's not just some conservative talk show guy or some left-wing DEI Harvard professor can easily understand and actually help.
That's things like Harlem's Children's Zone, where you actually hire really bright, guys from Harvard, like Jeffrey Canada, come together and hire other great black male role models to go into these communities. You actually go in and you build not only the K-8, but you build the preschools, you build the training for the young mothers, many times young single mothers, educate them about the impact of drugs, give them incentives to come and learn about what to do with their kids when they're young, and just really put in so many things that got to the point where the area is outperforming now. And so it is possible to fix these things. I'll tell you one other story, Rob, I love on this is that so Roland Fryer tested a bunch of different ways of spending money to help young inner city African-American kids. And the intervention that worked better than anything else by far was paying the kids for good grades, was giving them incentives for different grades. And this is really fun to me because it shows a lot of these kids who this worked with, they were obviously smart enough and able to get the good grades. They just didn't think it mattered. They didn't care. Something about the culture they were in, something about their experience so far had told them very clearly it doesn't matter, and not giving them the incentive to do it. And so, but by giving them incentive to do it, they crushed it. A bunch of them did. So now this is very unpopular. No one wants to pay kids for grades, apparently. But by in terms of the return on dollar, it was amazing, and I loved it because it shows these kids, many of them are able to be successful if we create the right frameworks for them.
Money is a powerful motivator, as you know in your field. Money is a very powerful motivator.
It's a big deal. It's not the only thing that gets people to do something, but I think especially money plus mission, if you can combine the two of them, it's that works really well.
Yeah, and sometimes it's money that kind of gets the gears going, and then you kind of find sometimes it's like starting a thing, getting involved, then you find your passion. That's like an oddly
when I first made money as a kid, as a teenager, of course I just want to buy a silver BMW, and that's the first thing, and it's money, and it's materialism. And then once you start having more success and more ability, these days I get most excited spending money on solving a policy problem in one of my states with Cicero that's fixing things for people, because that's just a really fun thing. It makes me proud to spend money on. So I think as you get more money and more awareness, it actually could take you in a positive direction if you do it right.
And lastly, on the DEI point, before we get on to other stuff, is just the sort of lack of understanding that you see by a number of popular figures, people like Mark Cuban, who I had a long debate with last year on big pharma, FDA regulation, etc. Very similar thing. I was about to hop in on the DEI debate, but other people like Konstantin Kiss and a number of others were already involved with that. But it's similar to Mark and I's long debate on Twitter, which Joe Rogan kind of facilitated. It was like same level of kind of naivete and not really understanding what the other side's actually saying. And so when it came to the vaccine mandates, big pharma, he was just like, well, why wouldn't we trust the FDA and the CDC? These are professional scientists and they've studied vaccines for this many years. And why aren't we just trusting the COVID narrative? Why aren't more people in those institutions saying the truth? And it's like, yeah, man, that's kind of the point. Like these institutions are not as reliable and trustworthy as you think. Similar with DEI, with Mark, he's just not kind of getting the point. He just seems to be entertaining or having this image conjured in his head of kind of DEI in this very kind of delusional fantasy world where it means more of like a fairness, not this equal outcomes. And I want to tie that to Kamala Harris as well. For you, endorsing Trump, is that also a factor for being pro-Trump and more critical of Kamala, given the DEI principles?
Yeah, I'll say something about him that probably overlaps for some of the things about her as well, is that sometimes it like behooves you not to understand something for what you're trying to achieve, right? And so, like, listen, Mark Cuban's obviously a bright guy. He's made billions of dollars and made some good deals. I think a lot of, obviously probably got a little bit lucky in the first bubble for a lot of his money, but he's very good as a celebrity and at marketing and at sales, and he has instincts around these things that are powerful. And, I'd say everyone has different superpowers. I think that's such a superpower of his that he probably lives a little bit in kind of like sales vibes, marketing land. Like for him, whatever is like selling and getting people to applaud and getting people to agree, like whatever that positive vibe is, that's the reality. I don't think he's like arguing with you about desperately caring about what's actually true. I don't think he's like stopping and analyzing, okay, what's actually true here in the world. He's saying like, I am on this team and this is my team I'm arguing for. And this is how I'm popular, is by pushing this thing. And so I'm just going to push that, and I'm going to slip and dodge in vibes world. And you might think you pinned me down, but I'm not even going to let myself get pinned down because I'm just winning the vibes game. So I think he's living in that kind of politically motivated salesy marketing world, unfortunately. So of course he probably sees how broken it is in so many places, but that's not useful for his argument. And similarly with Kamala, she had so many laws in the Senate, just like DEI this, like anti-racist that she's trying to pass. And like, I mean, I think she's smart enough for a lot of these things to know it's not actually helping. In fact, in some cases it's hurting, but it doesn't matter because she's signaling the team she's on. She's figuring out how to get more power with her team by funding these things. They're giving over $300 billion to NGOs these days out of the federal government, most of which are focused on these kind of equity activists and illegal immigrants and homeless and all this stuff run by progressives. Let me just give you a quick example on this with Harris, because you asked about her. Like one of her things recently, to see how they think, it was a price control idea. And so there's really two responses to the price controls idea.
Right.
The response to the average person who might not have studied economics, they'll say, here's why price controls don't work. We know very well, 95% of economists, if not higher, like, probably more than we'll actually agree on global warming even, will agree that price controls make no sense. They create scarcity. They create poverty. They ruin things. They ruin the signals of how a market works, and they just break stuff. And so that's agreed. We can go and you have a long conversation on that. Here's why it doesn't work. But the actual conversation you really want to be having, if you want to know how she's thinking, is why are these 10 very left senators proposing this? Are they all so dumb that they all don't understand that? Yeah, maybe a couple of them are that dumb, but you know what? Most of them are not that dumb. Most of them know this doesn't really work. But guess what? If you pass a price control law the way it was written in the Senate, because there is a law she's referring to, the 10 lefty senators wanted to do. If you pass that, you now have 23,000 companies caught by that law that can be investigated at any time, be punished any time arbitrarily with your regulators that you control. What do you think that does? That gives you immense power. That means all these people are going to be terrified to speak against you. They're going to actually want to help you and meet you and go along with you. Suddenly you have a bunch of new constituents on your side that are going to be pushing you in other ways and going to be easily punished when they step out of line. Like that's the kind of power these people want. This is not a conspiracy. This is how they think. This is how the Marxists and how the far left have thought consistently for the last 100 years, is putting things in place to give them the power to punish people and to influence our society more. So this is what's really scary about people like Harris, is these censorship NGOs, all these other types of laws that sound like they're for the populace. Like the useful idiots think they're for the populace. They're actually for power. That's really dangerous.
Right. Which is ironic because it's this purported ideology of dismantling power and understanding power dynamics and helping people that are powerless. But in fact, it's actually just metastasizing one's own selfish, politicized power.
It's raw power, and they're very good at raw power. It's terrifying if they win this election, what they'll do with that raw power. If they control the U.S. Senate as well, I think there's, and we can go into that if you want, there's just crazy things they'll do. And it's very scary. It's very scary. And I think that's why, I know that's why Elon's a good friend. I know that's why people like Elon and people like Bill Ackman and many other people who are on the moderate left, people like Mark Andreessen, extraordinary innovator and investor, legends in our society. A lot of these guys are even more to the right of me now because they've seen what these people really want. They've seen who they are, and they're terrified of this Borg, and they're terrified of how it makes everyone else terrified to even say anything. So because they are men whose job is to be a leader, they've had to speak out, and it has not helped them. All these places attack you like crazy when you speak out. It has not helped them in business at all. But they felt they had to, because that's who they are, and that's what a man does for a society and for a civilization. When he sees this kind of evil, he opposes it however he can. Yeah,
and Kamala recently was talking about social media companies and them needing to be held more accountable for the spread of misinformation.
She wants more power. If you say something I don't like, that's misinformation. Misinformation could basically be defined as things Democrats do not like. Anything Democrats do not like, that is misinformation, which must be clamped down on. Like that is where it is according to the Borg right now. And you could just see it again and again and again. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It matters if they don't like it. It's against their ideology. So yeah, it's a terrible thing going on right now.
We talked earlier, money is such a powerful motivation. We talked about incentives. I remember at the UATX event earlier this year, at your wonderful house. You invited all the students, and you were giving a very inspiring talk. And you talked about, I forget exactly what you said, but it was something to the effect of how we have this chimp part of our brain that just wants more and more and more, right? It's so much of it is serving the ego, and we want more money, we want more wealth and influence, etc. And obviously in your field, that's something to be very careful about. It's something you want to mitigate against, and you want to have ethical, moral structures in place to watch out for that. And make decisions that are ethical, not just for one's own political or financial interests.
Well,
when it comes to the defense industry, you were alluding to at the UATX talk, what are your thoughts about having the proper incentives in place, and how have you kind of navigated some of the ethical dilemmas of the defense industry, foreign wars, Ukraine, Israel, etc.? It's a very, very big question, but
sure. I think I'll take that, Rob, and I appreciate that. I think I'll take that in two parts. First of all, when I was much younger, a mentor once told me that a lot of great men like kind of instinctively strive for three things, in different amounts, like fame, money, and power. And he actually told me you're only supposed to be able to have two of the three. If you have all three of them, they'll take you down. So I don't know if I totally agree with that, but it's generally the case. It's much easier to have only two of those than all three of them. I guess Elon's living and flying close to the sun with that one, but I really hope they don't take him down. But so I think actually the wisdom there, of course, is that if you have other principles in your life and you learn and make sure you learn to care about those principles in a way that's very deep and true, then I think you can actually strive for a lot better things and you're a lot happier. I don't think anyone ever gets really happy striving for those three things. I think those three things are instinctual of what people go after. And it's actually really important that those are a means to an end. Those are, a means to fixing things and building things and creating things. And that gives you so much more actual long-term satisfaction when you have other ends. And then when it comes to defense, that's a great example of an area that is a very important mission-driven area. Listening with Palantir, a lot of conspiracy theories, I'm sure. Now it's a giant company and it's done a lot of things. But, Palantir helped stop a lot of major attacks. It helped work with special forces and others. And, to President Obama's credit, he was very involved in a lot of this as well. And it really helped eliminate thousands of terrorists at a time when a lot of them were threatening to attack our country very consistently and threatening to attack our bases and saved government huge amounts of money. So it's obviously was very important to get the best and brightest involved and create this. It did not exist otherwise. And similarly, defense nowadays, Xi Jinping, I was actually pretty optimistic on China 15 years ago. I saw a lot of great innovation there. I thought we'd end up working with them more closely and they'd move towards freedom. And Xi Jinping showed that was not the case at all. He's an ardent communist, cracked down on their tech people speaking out, really reinstituted a lot of the power and a lot of even stronger communism in that society in a way that's frankly terrifying to me. And he really started forcing a lot of their engineers to work on defense. He started taking their best and brightest and creating new weapons and creating new ways to fight us. And if China has its best and brightest creating weapons, and America had our old legacy defense primes that none of the smartest engineers went into anymore, that none of the top 5,000 computer scientists we track around the US were really helping because the cultures rejected them and because they were kind of old, broken, kind of government bureaucratic-like places in many parts of them. And listen, the primes still have some things that are good, but there's a lot that was wrong with them. As we say, wow, this is terrifying. We have a communist who truly believes in it, an authoritarian who wants to influence the whole world and wants to have the whole world obeying him and paying respect to him and how he wants to run things. And you have America, it's going to probably lose a defense conflict with him in the next 5 or 10 years, given how bad our stuff is relative to what they're doing. We have to get involved. And so at that point, we supported Palmer at Anduril from the very beginning. Anduril is now a new defense prime in the U.S. Started with a few of my former Palantir colleagues and Palmer Luckey, who'd built Oculus before, amazing company. We started a couple others. We've built two other, very large unicorn companies in the defense space now, both Saronic and Anduril, helping the Navy build hundreds or thousands of ships and Epirus, the EMP company. But anyway, so we got involved in this. And the answer is, Rob, is first of all, I very strongly believe it's important for the world, for some of our best and brightest, to make America able to deter others. I believe in America. I believe it's better that America versus Iran or Russia or China win. I don't want the bad guys to win. I think there are bad guys in charge of some of those places. But as you noted, if you're working on defense, if it's all you do, if you get really caught up in the money, then your incentives are not always right. Your incentives are for more militaristic thinking, for more conflict. And so I think in the movies, the bad guys in the old days we're always involved in building weapons, selling weapons, because, you sell more weapons in a bad scenario. And, fortunately, I've been able to be in the place where I see things that are just so obviously broken in our defense world, and I can start something from scratch and scale it up. And I personally have kind of got out of management of most of these companies, got out of my biggest parts of my holdings, and put them back into new things because I'm not as inspired to run the large defense companies. But as we're scaling them, I'm very involved, and it's important to do. So that's the choice I've made. Now I don't want to say that doesn't mean you're a bad person if you're helping run a large defense company. I mean, we need competent people to do this to oppose the bad guys. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, and some people, I think in that position, it does get to be a very complicated moral trade-off, because you shouldn't ever be lobbying for unnecessary wars, and you shouldn't ever be wanting to benefit from that. But at the same time, you do need to provide the best things, and you are going to benefit from that. So I think there's definitely in our society, President Eisenhower warned about this, and you've got to be very, very careful of the effect of the incentives of the military-industrial complex. But that does not mean we shouldn't fix it and make it better. So this is one of those dialectics where there's truth on both sides, and it's very hard for the average person to be able to keep both of those kind of opposing truths in their mind at the same time.
I didn't plan on asking you this, but as a follow-up, if you're open to going into it just for a minute before we go on to a couple other important questions. When it comes to Ukraine, Russia, Trump recently said that he has a master vision that he's going to put in place. He's going to talk to Putin, and they will achieve peace very quickly. He can't talk about it, but he says he has that master vision. Do you just kind of have any thoughts or assessment of what's happening there in terms of the U.S.?
I think our leadership has been terrible in this country the last 4 years. I think we had peace under Trump. I don't think Trump is some kind of like amazing genius, but he's strong and he's bold. He's unpredictable, and you don't want to mess with him. And if anything, I think some of the strategists on the left are like, well, we're going to tie Russia down and da 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 da. But the signaling to Russia before they came in was like it's like a weird thing where he's like already assuming they're going to attack and welcoming them in. The weakness we showed in Afghanistan, just embarrassment before that, it really showed our enemies that this was not a strong and bold administration that was going to give them trouble. Like if a really competent, strong leader was in charge, you basically say, all right, Putin, I have two options here. One option is that we make peace and we give you not a bad deal, and you save face, and you've lost 500,000 lives, and you need to be able to like go back to your people and say you got something. It's going to be small, but it's going to be something. It's positive, and we're going to find a way to, as you behave yourself, bring you back into the global economy and all benefit together from working with peace. Or the other option here is I'm going to fucking ramp this up, and it's going to be 10 times the amount of weapons, and we're going to do this, and you're going to be fucked. And I'm just going to tell everyone that you're a crazy madman who won't listen to us, and it's going to be really hard on you. So which one do you want? Do you want the peace, or do you want me to ram this up your ass? And you know what? I don't see Kamala being able to even think like that. I don't think Biden's doing that at all.
I think the latter option.
I think Trump would do that all day long. So I mean, this is like this is how you do it as a leader. You got to be strong. You got to be bold. This is what you do. I am literally credibly going to fuck you, or we're going to have peace. And that is the point of war. That's the point of deterrence. But that requires a strong leader, and that's not what we have right now.
Do you think that latter option could potentially escalate tensions between U.S. and Russia, and maybe even boil up and lead to World War III if Trump threatens Putin with more military action?
If we're already doing it, so the worst thing you could do, Rav, in a military situation is do something half-heartedly. You have to. The whole point of this is you don't want lives being lost. We've had hundreds of billions of dollars of stuff destroyed in Ukraine. We've had generations wiped out. This is terrible. It reminds me of Vietnam all over again, where we're doing things half-heartedly because we're afraid to escalate. You either don't do something, or you do it so goddamn hard that you end it much quicker, and you make sure the other person wants to end it much quicker. This kind of in-between sloppiness, that's not how war works. And it's not how war would ever work when I was in charge. Like this is the Desert Storm is the way war should work. You just annihilate them really quickly in the place you need to annihilate them, or you don't do it. You say, well, Russia's nuclear power. Fine. We're only going to annihilate them inside of Ukraine, but we're going to do it.
Okay. So carefully do it. Right. Because if you amp it up too much.
We're only going to do it. For me, I would do it only inside of Ukraine. I don't think America, I think when you have nuclear armed powers, you can't attack Russian soil, but you 100% can attack and just wipe them out in the Ukrainian area. And you say, we're going to have to do this because this is ridiculous unless we have peace. But if we have peace, we're going to be really respectful to you. So it's either going to be something really nasty and really strong, and I'm credible and I'm sorry, I'm a crazy man, I'm doing it. Or we'd have this great deal, going to help you save face. and people will criticize me for giving you too good of a deal and say I love dictators, but if you don't do this, then yeah, it's going to be really bad for you. And that's the way a strong leader does things.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, people are so worried and scared about Putin's potentially just utterly psychopathic, destructive tendencies, and negotiating with such a kind of monstrous power. You got to be careful, because if you make the wrong move, what if he starts attacking the U.S. or other European countries?
You know, and I'd love it if we had a president that people were really scared about negotiating with him. That'd be a better situation for us too.
Yeah.
We need a more wild guy than them, and that's but of course the guy at the end of the day who wants peace, and I think we can get that with this next president. I think frankly multiple other Republican governors have that attitude as well. It's just this boldness to stand up for what's right is really lacking right now in terms of our commander in chief.
Absolutely, yeah. The current administration has been just so weak on this point, and I do not trust Biden.
I mean, just the latest thing. Just the latest thing, by the way. You know who's giving Russia all these things to fight in Ukraine? And it's confirmed now by Blinken again, is that Iran is. Iran's literally giving them all sorts of missiles. I believe they just caught them giving them ballistic missiles. So you literally have our administration pressuring Israel to give in to the Iranian proxies and to give them everything they want, and to keep giving more and more and more. At the same time, Iran is fighting us to stand still and even pushing back and winning in Ukraine. And it's just the whole thing is a mess.
Right. Absolutely. I got two more questions for you. They're both very different. One, Palantir just entered the S&P 500. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Very cool to see. Any big picture lessons from starting a company that's now become so successful?
Well, it's a really good idea to have a bunch of really smart friends and get them to build something with you that is crazy ambitious, it turns out. And I say that kind of jokingly because it doesn't always work. And you know, I did spend a lot of time in Stanford when I was there, meeting people who I admired, and I thought Peter was one of the very brightest people in the world who I really got along with very well, and our intellects I think complement each other very well. So I was very lucky to find him when I did, and to have his help as a co-founder. And I think we built something much bigger than we would have if I had just done it with my roommate Stefan alone. Stefan's amazing, and then frankly, if we hadn't found Alex Karp, this company would not be nearly as big either. And then similar from multiple others who joined later on, including guys like Shyam Sankar and Aki, who are still there, and many others. So I think we were really lucky just to find a lot of really great superstar talent that we're able to scale for 20 years, which is very rare. Usually in businesses, you replace people a lot as you go along, people leave. Like having that kind of talent still there for that long, it's a very rare company. And you know, when you do something that's really mission driven, that you really care about for the right reasons, which is what Palantir was, sometimes it's amazing who you attract.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Last question, relating to a couple points that we hit on earlier. You're talking about how ambition can be so powerful, money is such a powerful motivator, but in the end, fame, success, money don't actually last. They don't provide the contentment that you're looking for. And we have so many beautiful and interesting religious traditions that talk so much about how you never actually arrive. There's actually no destination. You make the 1 million or the 100K first, you get to 150K, you get to 1 million, you start this company, that company, you get married, you get kids. It's like, this is a great philosopher, Alan Watts, just talks about this cycle, this illusion or this mirage where it's like the guy goes to college, gets good grades, starts a big company, starts a bigger company, has kids, has a wife, blah, 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 gets to 75. And he jokes, he's like, he realizes his teeth are broken, he's impotent, he's lying down, he needs people to help him, he can barely eat his own food. And he's like, what the hell just happened? The journey is now almost over. And I didn't really take time to appreciate it. I was just chasing after the next thing more and more and trying to get somewhere, but you never actually arrive somewhere because it's always about achieving the next thing. And for me, I think I've been very, very lucky and fortunate in some way, but also just something that I've willingly taken on from listening to a number of people in just exploring my own life. And I increasingly view various mental health challenges that I've had, very, very difficult bouts of depression and chronic debilitating anxiety since graduating high school as gifts to show me the light and to uncover things about myself that I wouldn't have otherwise. And things that what a lot of people are saying is like, these are things people realize in their 30s. And I feel gifted to work with a lot of difficult challenges now. And particularly when it comes to ambition, and something that I just realized earlier this year in a very powerful psychedelic therapy session, which is not something I talk about a lot personally, but something I just realized of like so much of what I was doing when it come to my work and podcasts and Twitter was trying to get validation and approval, was trying to get this like this elusive success to then prove, the childhood bullies, the people that picked on me because I was weird or my skin color, etc. when I was a kid. It's like I'm still chasing after that. And it was like I've kind of realized like that was not the right motivator. And the motivator should be actually improving the world, helping other people, giving my honest opinion on things, not trying to get validation and just fuel this endless kind of toxic ambition, because ambition can be toxic. There can be a dark side.
It can be, Rob, sometimes having a little bit of a chip on your shoulder is not the worst thing. It's
absolutely.
If you harness it correctly, I think it's a positive thing, but you're right. For me, we just had our 5th child a couple months ago, and having children is a great perspective. It kind of slows things down in time for a second and kind of shows you what's really important, and some really beautiful moments. We woke up early for my 3rd daughter's 4th birthday this morning. It was very cute. Wow. And we, so I think, Kissinger was a friend. He told me at his house once, history has no plateaus. And it actually is the case that it doesn't have plateaus. Like, as you said at the beginning of your monologue, I think, a lot of the biggest mistakes in geopolitics and in business is you think you're going to get to somewhere, you think you're going to be done with World War II, and now you're done. And actually you're just starting something new that we really screwed up the first several years because we were so exhausted from World War II. And it's the same thing in business and same thing in life. Like, every success is a platform for something new. It is a platform for doing the next adventure. But you're right. It's really important to I think whether it's meditation or psychedelics for some or whatever else, we have to stop and appreciate the universe we're in along the way, and not just be rushing to the next thing.
I know you got to go in a minute here or two, but I just want to bring home what I was saying earlier to a question, which was, if you had to give advice to your 23-year-old self, to just imagine me as yourself. I don't know who was more good looking or who was more successful or whatever, but I'm sure you were. But just imagine me being you at 23. What would you look back on? So much ambition, which is why I relate to you on so many levels. But such a big vision, such a grandiosity. What would you say to someone in that position at that age?
Well, there's nothing wrong with ambition and grandiosity and wanting to have a really big impact. I think at that age, there's this energy where you could do anything. I remember thinking when I was on a plane once at that age, that if it was going to start to crash, I would just grab something and run to the emergency exit and rip it open and hold it and glide down and survive landing in a hay bale or something. I just felt like nothing could stop me, right? It's so you have this really amazing ability to take on the world as someone in his early 20s. And, you should do it. You should go after it. You should build, but make sure you're including people in your life who are the people you want around you long term, because the people around you really shape you. And sometimes there's people I shouldn't have had in my life. Sometimes people I wish I'd made time for. So, family, friends, good people really matter. Really keep the good ones around and spend more time with them. That's good for you. Be ambitious about getting even more great people in your life, and go really deep on topics you're passionate about. Really make sure you take time for deep work, take time to study and go back to first principles and remind yourself who you are and why you're doing it. But I think you're on a good path, Rolf.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it. This was a great conversation. We hit on a wide-ranging subjects. Appreciate it. It was really good.
It's good to see you.
All right. See you.